Hi everyone, you are Reddit expose there, enjoy watching.
We met not on a romantic bridge or at a concert, but in a coffee queue at Victrola on Capitol Hill. I was late for the morning stand-up. Slack was flashing on my phone, and the barista had mixed up the orders. The girl in front of me, in a plaid shirt and with a ring earring in her left eyebrow, received my latte, and I received her Americano. We laughed, exchanged glasses, and she said, "I'm Claire. If my boss asks why I'm having coffee again, I'll say it's your joint." I shrugged my shoulders. "I'm Alex. I can sign a receipt." She took a picture of my glass with my name crookedly written on its tails and went to the door. I looked back at the exit. "Do you go to Lake Union for lunch?" That's how our lunches began, on the bench at South Lake Union. Soup from takeaway food, tea from a thermos, and conversations about nothing, which always turn out to be important. Claire was a UX researcher at a startup that made an app for nurses' schedules. I worked as a product designer for a small B2B company, drawing interfaces for warehouse logistics and arguing with developers about pixels. We lived in different parts of Seattle. I was in a studio on 12th Avenue, where I could see a tree and a piece of brick wall from the window. She was in Ballard, next to the Sunday market and the smell of smoked salmon in the morning. The first year was easy. We rode bicycles in Gasworks Park, took a ferry to Bainbridge, argue over who had better ramen kazuki or samurai noodle. One February, it started to drizzle, which in Seattle can go for weeks, and we filmed bouldering at the Seattle Bouldering Project for the evening. My foot slipped, I landed stupidly, and she deftly held the mat. "You're holding the case like a designer holds the deadline," Claire said. "It's obvious that you're trying, but the technique is suffering." I burst out laughing and realized that I was in love. We moved in together 9 months later. A 2-bedroom apartment on the ground floor in Fremont, windows on the alley, where the garbage trucks arrive at 6:12 sharp. We bought a table on Craigslist, which wobbled until I found an extra bolt in the IKEA set and put it under the leg. They hung up a cork board for adult plans, a communal apartment, a list of shops. "Don't forget to water the monster." I forgot anyway. "Turn off the heater, the light bill is no joke." The problems did not come with a scandal, but like moisture in the corners of the window unnoticed. Claire began to do more research in the field. Evening interviews with nurses after shifts, morning trips to clinics. I got stuck at meetings where they argued about buttons and capiz, and I was annoyed by the phrase "let's get back to this in Q3. We started saying later more often. Then we'll discuss the vacation. Then we'll buy a normal mattress. Then we'll visit my friends in Portland. Then, in May, her startup received a round and offered her the role of lead, with a promotion and office days at Bellevue. The road over the bridge, traffic jams, long days. I was happy for her and lied to myself that nothing was changing. Everything was changing. We started having dinner at different times. She fell asleep at 10, and I could sit with my laptop until 1 o'clock. On weekends, when we finally met, we didn't have the energy to go to the mountains or to the cinema. On Sunday evenings, we would open the calendar at the same time and try to put our weeks together like two incongruous puzzles. The last straw was expected and still sudden. Claire was offered a transfer to San Francisco. "Not move urgently, but let's think about it. We've been thinking for 3 weeks. Lists of pros and cons, a sign in Google Docs, a budget where you can't forget the relocation tax." I found myself counting the distance, not the money. I could work remotely, my company allowed it. But every time I mentally took out the furniture and stacked the boxes, something inside creaked. The conversation happened on the embankment at Olympic Sculpture Park. It was windy, the seagulls were cursing, and for the first time I said out loud, "I'm not ready to leave. Not from you, but from myself." Claire nodded. "No hysterics. No, how can you?" She rarely raised her voice at all. "I'm scared to go alone," she confessed, "but it's scarier to stay and then get angry." I wasn't being heroic. "I'm afraid to stay and regret that I persuaded you not to go." We walked in silence to the parking lot, and at home we opened our laptops and wrote a list. Who gets the couch? Who gets the bike rack? Who gets our ridiculous collection of mugs from ferry shops? Monstera went to her. "She's going to die with you, Alex." I agreed. The breakup was civil, but it still hurt. I drove Claire to the airport. In the early morning there were 3 sweaters in my bag and a kitchen in a fragile box. At the exit, she hugged me really hard and said, "You're a good person. It's just that we have different cities." I said, "Write me if you need instructions for our kettle." We both smiled at the inappropriate joke. For the first few weeks, I lived like in a museum of my own life. I moved furniture, changed a light bulb to a warmer one, rearranged books without meaning. For the first time in a long time, I signed up for a therapist at Capitol Hill Counseling. I took a rolling payment based on income. Said it out loud. I was confusing caring and control. I ticked boxes instead of talking. The therapist asked, "What do you do when you don't know what to do?" Opening Figma. We both laughed, and then we made a list where Figma wasn't. Running around Green Lake, calling my parents on a schedule, cooking on Wednesdays, not ordering. I started running in the mornings and brewing normal coffee instead of the endless to-go. On Fridays, I went to Ballard Farmers Market, bought eggs, greens, and a fish soup raid. I discovered the Seattle Central Library. I took 3 books and returned them on time, which I was proud of as a schoolboy. On Tuesday evenings, I went to free film screenings at the Northwest Film Forum. I sat in a half-empty hall and realized that I finally didn't need to share my impressions right away. You can take notes on your phone. Clara and I corresponded discreetly. Logistics, addresses, your package is still arriving at our address. Once she sent a photo, the monster had put out a new leaf. I replied with a smiley face and said out loud, "Well done," not to her, but to myself, for not getting nostalgic. In September, she wrote, "I'll be in Seattle for a week. I have 2 free evenings. Coffee?" We met at Oddfellows. Same smile, different rhythm. She talked about the office at Somo, and I talked about how I started turning off my phone at 9 and living. We didn't discuss what if. At parting, she said, "You've become quieter somehow." I nodded. That's a compliment. Life without a big plot turned out to be more stable. At work, I was offered a boring but stable project to redraw the report module. I agreed, and for the first time in a long time, I stopped burning. On Saturdays, I taught a volunteer workshop at the Finney Neighborhood Association. Short texts for real life. How to write to neighbors so as not to sound passive-aggressive. How to ask for silence after 10. How to leave a note on the washing machine so that no one quarrels. People laughed and took away the "thank you for washing the filter" stickers. One day, at Trader Joe's on Roosevelt, we ran into each other again. I have a basket with frozen pizza and greens. She has a bag of cat litter. She sheltered the cat from the neighbor's karma monsters. We said hi. "How are you?" "Fine." On the way out, I found myself feeling calm. No cinematic comeback, no scars that drag. It's just 2 people who had a common address and are now different. Closer to winter, I finally put a door closer on the front door so that it wouldn't slam. I bought a normal humidifier, stopped swearing at the electricity bill, just lowered the temperature to 68 degrees and put on warm socks. In therapy, we decided to meet once a month. "It looks like you've learned how to finish on time," she said. I joked that I bought a timer for the kitchen and now I can't digest pasta. But inside, it sounded serious. Finishing on time is not throwing, not dragging. In the spring, I applied for a small grant to the city to hang 2 benches on our street with signs saying you can wait for yourself. The grant was approved. My neighbors and I tight and the anchors, leveled them, and I screwed a short phrase onto the brass. Further is not always faster. A day later, a guy in a uniform was sitting on a bench, eating a burrito and gnawing at some decision of his own. I walked by and felt strangely proud of the banal bolts. Sometimes my friends write to me. "I saw Claire in Union Square. She seems happy." I replied, "Great. I'm really happy for her." Our then turned out to be different, and that's okay. In the summer, I met Hannah. We locked eyes at the Saturday open mic at Couth Buzzard. She makes a sound at concerts. When the artists, everything falls down. We started dating without promises of forever. It's just that the schedules have coincided, and I'm no longer trying to save the world by other people's efforts. For the first time in a long time, I'm not explaining myself through an X. I just say, "I'm Alex." I can write short and tighten the screws on the level. Sometimes, out of habit, I go to Victrola on Capitol Hill, order 2 drinks for old time's sake, and take one with me to take to a neighbor who repairs bicycles in the basement. The names are still written incorrectly on the glass. One barista writes ales all the time. I don't fix it. It's funny that once it all started with messed up glasses, and it ends with me not trying to straighten out the inscription. If my ex-girlfriend's story requires morality, it's boring and mature. Love can be good and still end. It's not a failure if you've both chosen your cities and you're not dragging each other across the bridge by force. The realistic thing is not to stay friends, as in a sitcom, but to have the lie by a 2,700,000 light bulb instead of return to the conversation in notes and you really buy it. Screw it in and stop squinting. I sometimes flip through old photos, the fairy, our rickety table, the monster, which is probably already a jungle by now. I close it, put water on the tea and write on sticky paper 3 words that keep me better than any vows. Timely, enough, politely. Then I turn off the phone, go out on the veranda and listen to the city breathing its steady drizzling breath. I'm here. That's enough. And everything else is on schedule. In the spring, everything did not go fast, but smoothly. The snow on the roadsides has melted. The smell of wetwood and gasoline is back at the entrance, and my short cases from no suddenly began to add up to weeks. Hannah and I got used to it without heroism. Her world is late-night sound checks at Numos, tractor taverns in Balor. Wiring, cases on wheels, ears ringing until morning. Mine are early stand-ups, a boring but predictable reporting module, and close laptop at 9. We agreed on a simple thing. On Sundays, we would have soup together and silence, without explanations for half an hour at concerts. I help carry cables, but I don't climb in to steer. Her rule in response: no on weekdays, one more set and go home. It works better than romantic promises. The city sent a letter from the Department of Districts. We saw your signs on the benches. Would you like to make a couple more at the entrances to the paths at Burke Gilman? I wrote 3 short texts on brass. Further isn't always faster. Catch your breath, then go. Short steps count. The neighbors came to tighten the anchors. Someone brought a level. Someone brought a thermos of cocoa. The next day, on one of the benches, a grandfather with Nordic walking sticks was eating a banana and looked pleased. I walked by and felt everything fall into place inside without fanfare. The work has also become clearer. I've finished the reports. Fewer clicks, normal signatures, no learn more without meaning. Our product suddenly said, let's take a look at the whole microcopy. I want it to be clear to people, and not within the framework of our KPI. I wrote a little warm text guy, not error 500, but something broke on our side. Try it later, we're already fixing it. No magic, retention figures increased by a couple of %, and support stopped responding to templates by half a page. I cross paths with Claire once more, as casually as possible. Her package is at the old address. The mail has lost the track, she wrote. Will I be in town? Will I pick you up? We met at Oddfellows, somehow naturally. We talked about the weather in SF. The wine from Market Street is a separate element, about her project for clinics, and I talked about benches and a microcopy guy. There are no what-ifs. At the exit, she said, I'm glad you're steady. And it was honest and it was enough. I told Hannah about it that evening. She nodded. Thanks for telling me. We made soup and switched to a choice of to 7 OK versus 3,000 light bulbs. We won to 7 OK. There was also a small failure. By our standards, not to be a hero. I went bouldering again in the Seattle bouldering project, slipped, pulled the brush. It was okay, but the grip on the mouse hurt. For the first time, I didn't put up with it. I signed up for polyclinic, got a bandage, ibuprofen, and an exercise sheet. Hannah put a not a hero sticker on the fridge, a reminder that rest is not surrender. He was released 2 weeks later. At the end of May, it blew so hard that the lights went out in part of the block. The manager of the house wrote wait, and my neighbors and I just opened the laundry room, stretched out extension cords, and hung up an ad. Hot water. Charging. 15 minutes on the phone. I took out the kettle and the extension cord. Our neighbor from the basement is a small inverter. By evening, someone had added the WC arrows so that they wouldn't run around the floors. There was no heroic chronicle, just people doing a little bit at a time. Hannah came in late, wet and happy. The sound was saved. Everyone is alive. We sat in the dark with tea, and for the first time, I liked the silence without Wi-Fi. In the summer, I returned to workshops at the Finney Neighborhood Association. The theme is simple. Short, polite texts that save nerves. They brought real cases. A neighbor puts a scooter at the door. Knows after 10. The washing machine is busy, and things are wet. Together we came up with 3 universal blanks. 1. Hi. This is from to be. Is it possible to move the scooter inside the apartment? The door won't open. Thank you. 2. Good evening. The music is great, but you can hear it in the bedroom after 22 o'clock. Can you keep it down? Thank you. 3. I took off your things and put them on the top shelf. I set the timer to dry. If anything, I'll knock. To be. People were taking pictures on their phones and laughing with relief. Hannah and I arranged a one-day trip to Vashon, a ferry, coffee, a paper cup, or road without a goal. On the beach, where there are wet rocks and seaweed, we agreed to talk through the axes at once and never come back to it. I told her about Claire, and she told me about the drummer from the tour and how hard it is to live in a suitcase. The conclusion for both turned out to be the same: not to take on the role of a rescuer in a new relationship. We returned to the city quietly, as if after a long workout. At some point, I was overwhelmed by an obvious household issue. Parents, mom, and dad moved closer to the eastern state. They asked when to introduce. We held a call on Sunday afternoon, Hannah with an earpiece, I with a laptop. The usual conversation: where do you work? How do you survive without a car in Seattle? Is it really raining all year round? Mom wrote later: it's a good one. Auntie speaks to the point. This is her highest praise. In the fall, the department called again. Will you make small signs for stairs in the park at Cary Park? People stumbled there, especially in the dark. I suggested for short ones, one step at a time, hand on rail, short steps. Eyes up sometimes, you've got it. They were already spinning up like a well-established team. One holds a flashlight, the second holds a screwdriver, and the third holds a level. A day later, I saw a mother and child reading aloud and walking to the beat. Simple things work if you don't overload them. Hannah and I didn't move in together instantly. First, she left a couple of night sets with me. A brush, hoodie, earplugs. Then there's tea, some plates, and a set of hexagons. Hers is more convenient than mine. By the way, a month later, I found myself not checking where is she, but just living. And if she's at home, fine. If she's on the playground, fine too. We discussed how we want to move on, not forever, but next season, that we'll occupy the kitchen in winter, make a sound at the school festival in spring, and bike rides to Golden Gardens in summer. I thought less about Claire. Sometimes I'd get a photo of Monster, it's really a jungle now, with the caption, he did it. I'd put the heart on and go put the pasta water on, without a second bottom. Once, a postcard arrived from San Francisco with a view of the bridge and the phrase, "Thank you for further, is not always faster." It came in handy. I put her at the entrance next to the housekeeper. It's funny, but that's exactly what a healthy "we're okay" looks like, on 10 by 15 cardboard. By winter, I finally bought a proper door closer for our house, one that doesn't slam. I chipped in on the floor, screwed it up on Saturday, and wrote in the chat, "Now be quiet, tell me if anything happens." I received a smiley face from a woman from 3C and "thank you. The baby is not waking up." The best metric. If you try to call it a continuation of the story about the ex, then it's boring and very lively. I learned not to put my life into plots, but to deal with infrastructure, signs, light bulbs, closers, short phrases that hold. Love here is not in opposition to the past, but a new habit: to speak on time, to be silent on time, to turn off the amplifier on time. Sometimes in the evening, Hannah and I go to Victrola on Capitol Hill. The barista still writes my name as Ailes. I don't fix it. We take a mug each, walk home on the wet asphalt, discuss which lamp burned out on the stairs, and who will go to the Home Depot tomorrow for a bag of screws. It's not a movie, but I feel comfortable in it. I'm here. The little things are working for me. We'll finish the rest as best we can, in short steps. In winter, the reorg caught up with us. A polite letter from R came to the Slack, then the calendar itself put all hands. We stood in the meeting room, waiting for the VP to choose the words. As a result, the department was not closed, but the product was cut. The reports were left, but my side projects were later. 2 guys were released. I went out onto the wet Capitol Hill, sat on the steps at Victrola, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't optimize anything. I just called Hannah. "I'll be home in an hour," she said. "The soup is already there." We ate soup by the window and were silent. Then she said her favorite phrase, "What are we doing for a small one?" The small one turned out to be a list. Finish the microcopy guy, update the portfolio, write to 3 familiar products, because asking in advance is not a weakness. I wrote, and the following week, I was invited to a small startup for a consultation, to rewrite empty states and errors as for people. I gave them 5 templates and 2 principles, honestly and briefly. There's not much money, but they keep their roots. With Hannah, We had our first serious turn out of the blue. With the best intentions, I repacked her case with cables, I marked it with ties, sorted it into bags, and also put the instructions on top. I come back in the evening and he's silent. She sat down on the floor and looked into her briefcase. "It's like I wasn't at home," she said. "I know where everything lies, even if it's chaos from the outside." I really apologized without a but. We brought some of the chaos back and came up with a rule. If fix concerns another tool, ask first. I put a sticker on the closet, "Not a hero." It works better than any timer. In the spring, the district department made another request. "Will you make little signs to the stock bars on the trail at Ravenna Park? People in the rain don't understand where puddles don't form." I wrote 5 words on the aluminum plates: "Dry path when it pours." The 3 of us spun, and in the first downpour I saw my mother with a stroller walking with them. It's a good feeling. I didn't save anyone's life, but I did save someone's shoes. We were solely moving in together, not completely. I got a second set of her earplugs in the knitstand, and she has my old hoodie, a guitar case. I handed over the keys without ceremony. I just hung a duplicate on a hook by the door and said, "The one who has the key lives here." Hannah nodded, then brought over a box of chur stickers, and we stuck 8 of them on the inside of the door so that only we could see. My favorite is "No Heroes Backstage." Clara and I crossed paths again at Ballard Farmers Market. She was with a colleague, and I was having cheese and apples. "Hello, like rain." "Yes, the bridge is being raised at the wrong time again." 5 minutes of smooth adult speech. She showed a photo of her office, an ordinary open space and a monster, really like a jungle. "Thanks then for the shorter in the text," she said. "We rewrote many of the doctor's tablets in this way." I said, "Glad." And it was true. We each bought a pie and went in different directions. There are no what-ifs. It's a good chapter, finished on the right page. In May, I finally got a kick out of Seattle Humane. Not for heroism, but for an old cat that no one needs. We left with a redhead, 11 years old, named Ro in the passport, Royal Pine. But we just have Ro. He has a chronic charisma and intolerance of an empty bowl. Hannah, who is not a feline, turned out 3 days later to be the person whose cat sleeps on her hoodie while she fixes patch cables. It was a working summer. Hannah was invited to a short mini tour of the Northwest, Portland to bonus. We talked in advance about how not to break each other. Short "I'm okay" after the sound check. "No, do you love me?" At 4 in the morning. 1 video call per tour is optional. It worked. I went to a concert in Portland, helped her carry the racks, bought her proper knee pads, the stage is a sport, and drove back on a night Flixbus, listening to the cabin snoring in different keys. At work, I put the squeeze on their warm microscopio in production. We have replaced a dozen ice cold phrase to human. From a favorite, instead of "session expired, now you came back too late. Let's start over." It's trite, but people swear less. Plus, I was hired part-time in the city program to sign small objects as is. Trash cans, ramps, shops, less jewelry, more benefits, it says in their TK. Mine. Closer to autumn, we were brainwashed again. Already at home, Hannah returned from the night set, and I automatically started telling her about the funny onboarding task. She nodded, but her gaze was through. I realized too late. The person has post-nose. His ears are ringing. We've come up with another rule upon returning from the site. Quiet hour. Show her tea. Hugging in silence. "We'll talk later." Since then, she started bringing me recordings of the silence of the playground. 3 seconds before the first chord. He says it's like breathing in. Autumn presented a strange project. The school in Beacon Hill asked for short phrases on the steps for the morning stream. The children were running. The parents were cursing. And I chose the words: shoes on, eyes open, 1 rail, 1 step. We're not late if we're kind. On the 3rd week, a head teacher wrote to me, "The number of falls is 0. The number of smiles is noticeable." For the first time in my life, I opened a letter and hung it over my desk. The weather has become a real Seattle. The drops are even. The wet asphalt glitters like a new microphone head. Hannah and I, returning home through Cal Anderson, talked about winter as a project. What's going to keep us going? Soup on Sundays, to 7 OK lamps, a cat once a month, a movie without a finale to think about, and to signs in the city. Yours and mine. Her sign appeared in Numos on the dressing room door. Hydrate. Stretch. You're not the amp. I'm proud of this phrase, as if it were a Nobel Prize, because it's also about not being a hero. Winter also brought domestic troubles. A pipe in the basement of the house burst. The manager is waiting again, and we are doing small things again. I printed out the water shut-off circuit with the emergency phone, hung it by the elevator. The neighbor from 3C brought a fan. 2A brought mops. 2 hours later, the leak was localized, and a day later the smell was gone. Then someone added the arrow to the trash, to the right. Life has become a millimeter calmer. About the money, consulting has gradually become regular. On Fridays, have an hour of short phrases for 2 NGOs, a clinic and a food bank. We rewrote their forms. Less shame, more specifics. Instead of "do you meet the criteria?" now, "tell me if you need help with," and a list. People stopped closing the page on the third question. On New Year's Eve, Hannah and I did what we had been avoiding. We rented an apartment together. They found it on Montlake, ground floor. Windows to the living room, a kitchen like Teeple's, a place for counters and a cat on the windowsill. We agreed on boring things in advance. Budget, cleaning, who takes out the trash if the concert is on the night. I hung up our door closer. My parents are proud of me again. She fixed the panel under the hooks on my keys and her duct tape. At the entrance there is a small shelf for other people's hands. There is always a supply of earplugs, band-aids and tea boxes. The guest takes it, we replenish it. At that time, Claire sent a short message. "I'll be on my way to the conference. If I see you, only for 15 minutes and without exhibits." We met at Cax's gathering space. Coffee, vinyl nose, people in hats. 15 minutes turned out to be exactly 15. She said, "It's good that we're not trying to explain anything. You have your own water, I have mine." I reply, "And we both have a shore." They shook hands, without hugs. I went out into the rain calm. Roe and I live like old people. Tills with a hint of paste in the morning, the sun on the windowsill in the afternoon, and watching the heater in the evening. Sometimes I think it's strange how an animal doesn't teach drama, but routine. That's probably why I like the street signs so much. And recently, after the holidays, my mother came for the first time to really visit. We took her to Gas Works, then on the ferry to Bainbridge, fed her soup, and showed her how the tape on the door closer makes sure and the door doesn't slam. Mom looked at Hannah, at the cat, at my screws in the coffee can and said, "Well, everything is coming together a little bit." I smiled. This is the best review. To be honest, I do not know what will happen in a year. Maybe we'll get a second cat, or Hannah will go on a longer tour, or I'll finally collect all the short texts into a small brochure and leave them in coffee shops. All I know is that further is not always faster, and that our urban project living without heroism is working. The lamps are warm. The signs are not pretentious, the doors do not slam. People thank you briefly and to the point. Last night we were walking along Pine. The wet asphalt reflected the taillights, and Hannah asked, "When was the last time you thought of an X as an event?" "A long time ago," I said. "This is the context now, and the event is you, the cat, and the door closer." She laughed, held her hood up, and we crossed the zebra crossing, where my brass phrase is on the curb. Short steps count. We walk in short steps. And it seems that's why everything is moving. Spring in Seattle always happens not according to the calendar, but according to the little things. First there were puddles that children avoid, then there was the eternal dampness in the entrance, which my door closer finally defeated. I realized that the story was coming to an end when everything around me began to work without unnecessary words. Hannah and I have completed what we promised ourselves for a long time. A small brochure, practical warmth, 20 pages of short phrases and pictures. Not a hero. Short steps count. There's enough water. If you come back late, we'll start over. I took a pack to Caxp, another to the district library on Capitol Hill, and left 3 copies at Victrola next to the sugar. No one applauded, but in the evening they sent me a photo. The brochure is on the table, and someone wrote in the margins with a pen, "Thank you for the 27 OK lamps." That's all I need. In the house, we installed a sensor lamp in the dark corridor between the elevator and the trash can. I screwed a sign on top, "Night light," so you don't guess. The next day, a neighbor from to be put a note under the door. "Now I don't shy away from the corner. You're cool." Ro tried to eat the note because paper is foo if you're 11 and have red hair. The work has leveled off. The city program extended the contract for another 6 months because people swear less at the ramps. In the product, my human texts reach onboarding, where there used to be error for 100. Now we did not understand the request. Let's try easier. The forms at the clinic and the food bank became shorter, and the receptionist sent an email. The queue is moving faster. I printed it out and put it next to the one with 0 drops. Clara and I didn't cross paths anymore. The last meeting at Kexp was correct. 15 minutes exactly 15. This has become part of the general order of things, like a new sticker on the door. Only we can see it. The former ceased to be a plot, but remained a coordinator. At home, Hannah and I cleaned up where we used to argue. Her cable case is now only signed from the inside. She can see the tags. No one touches my toolbox without hate, can I? On Fridays, we still have half an hour of silence. Sure. Not a hero. The tour includes one optional video call and a short "I'm okay" after the sound check. Works. On Sundays, soup. If you don't have the strength, take the soup out of the box, but it's still soup. One evening we came back through Cal Anderson. It was raining honestly, without surprises. I was holding a bag of buckwheat and filters, and Hannah was holding a guitar case, which is always heavier than it looks. Brass flashed on our curb. Short steps count. I made up these words myself, but I still read them every time as if for the first time. Well, she said at the door. Which ending do you like? The one where the doors don't slam, I reply. And the light turns on at the first click. The hallway really clicked at first. Ro did the perimeter check laps and triumphantly sat on the hoodie. I took the last copy of Practical Heat out of the pack and wrote in pencil on the back, right on top of the barcode. Finale is when small things work on their own. We had dinner with soup, which warms rather than impresses. Hannah was fixing the belt for the rack, and I was checking to see if there were any extra earplugs in the stranger's shelf. The phone lay face down on the table, where there were ferry tickets to Bainbridge. Mom liked it. We'll go again, and a list of small things for the week. Bring more brochures to the library. Replace the batteries in the sensor. Buy raw food not for princes, but delicious. Before going to bed, I went out onto the landing to watch how the elevator lamp catches the movement and gently picks up the steps. There's a neat card in a transparent pocket on a change machine in the laundry room. Take it if you don't have enough. Give it back if you can. It wasn't my quarters that were there right now, and that was the perfect sign. The system was living without an author. He returned, pulled the door closer. The door closer made its quiet shaw. Hannah was already packing the guitar. Ro was inspecting the empty bowl, and the rain was drumming steadily on the grass. I put the kettle on, took a sticker, and wrote it large so that I could see it in the morning. Next, the little things. I glued it to the closet, turned off the overhead light, and left it warm in the hallway just in case. We lay down. The city worked quietly all night. If I still need one sentence instead of a big story, then it will be simple. I'm home. The doors don't slam, the lamps are warm, and short steps count. The rest is tomorrow.